I would like to say thank you to all the people tonight, too, for being here. It's really an honor to be with you, and the fact that you would share your time and be here for this time of reflection and prayer certainly is, to me, I think your gift for me, and it gives me the opportunity to prepare some thoughts and share them with you. And it's so often the case through our discussion, our sharing with one another, I feel pretty confident that I'm going to learn from you this afternoon as well. I just wanted to say a couple of words by way of introduction. First of all, I'm prepared really to talk for 45 minutes straight, but that might not be the most interesting thing for you, because your life is listening to people lecture to you, usually for 45 minutes straight. And my life, when it comes to speaking, is usually to talk in 10-minute increments, a homily. If I gave a 45-minute presentation on Sunday at Mass, people would not be too happy. So if you don't want to sit passively and just kind of do what you do this afternoon, what you do all day long, and hear someone speak for 45 minutes and want to jump in with a question, a comment, an observation, by all means, I welcome that. And like I say, I'm used to speaking at 10-minute intervals, so I might get tired after a little while, and I would appreciate your sharing your thoughts with me. So I mean that sincerely. As I say, I'm prepared, and I can just keep going on and on and on, but that might not be the most interesting or the most helpful, because, again, we're talking about a subject where we all have the experience, and I think we can learn from one another's experience, so I welcome you're raising your hand, you're adding your input, your comment, your observation at any time. I'd also like to say, as I was preparing for this evening, it was interesting the experience that I had, because it was a few weeks ago, I think, that Father Picaro called, he made this invitation, and when someone asks you to come and maybe make a presentation, you're really kind of doing somebody a favor, If I was looking for somebody in my parish to come and be a speaker at an evening of recollection or whatever, I know that they would be kind of going out of their way, and you're always grateful for someone to say thank you. So I like to live by the golden rule. If somebody asks me to do something for them, I always say yes, and vice versa. I'm always grateful when I ask somebody to do me a favor and they say yes to me. So it's all very easy, that exchange, the invitation, my accepting. But then as we got closer to the date, I started to remember what the topic was that I said yes to, and it was suffering. I thought to myself, suffering, that's kind of a dark topic, it's a heavy topic, it's a difficult topic. Do people really want to come and listen and maybe even share their thoughts, their experience on something that probably most of us are trying to avoid? Think about suffering. You can kind of try to avoid that topic with that experience, not the topic, but the experience. And yet it is a part of our life, not just as human beings, but as Christians. But the blessing, I think, is for us as Christians that while we know that every person who experiences our human condition at times in their life is going to know suffering, the fact is that because of our faith, we're blessed to be able to try to find some meaning, or as the title of this reflection speaks of, we're able to find some grace, some gift that comes from our willingness to embrace the sufferings that oftentimes come our way in living our lives in this world. So, acknowledging right up front, it's a heavy topic, but one also too that we've all experienced in our life. Again, I say to you, I'd like to, at some times in this presentation, share some personal experience, and if you would like to share your own experience, I welcome that, especially the way perhaps you've experienced in your own life or witnessed in the life of people who are closest to you, that ability to find grace or to find a blessing, to find somehow that God can bring something good even out of an experience as difficult as the experience of suffering would be. So let me just start with a few introductory thoughts. What is suffering? What do we mean by suffering? If we were to just go to a very simple dictionary definition of what suffering is, the dictionary would describe suffering as the state of undergoing pain, distress, hardship. So again, who really here wants to be volunteering for pain or distress or hardship? Not anybody really who's thinking rationally. These are things we like to avoid. And if we think about what we might think of as the opposite of suffering, we might think of comfort. And if you go to the dictionary's definition of comfort, we think of comfort as a state of physical ease, freedom from pain, freedom from constraint, freedom from distress or hardship. And if we just reflect on the society in which we live, isn't it true that we are part of a society or a culture that really kind of flees from suffering or avoids it at all costs and really seeks out comfort to the extent that we can find that for ourselves? Let me just give you a very simple example. Everybody here today is wearing clothes, right? You know? Now, that's good because, you know, it helps us to practice the virtue of modesty, which is a virtue that's important to our living our faith. Also, we're wearing clothes because we want to be warm, right? Nobody really likes to be cold. Father Vaccaro mentioned that for 2 years I was a student in Ottawa. Well, among other things, I learned a lot in school during that experience, but outside of school, I learned what cold really is like. In Ottawa, and I am not exaggerating, in Ottawa there was one weekend where the temperature did not get above -20. That was the high. So that has enabled me to do two things. One, to realize for me cold is pain and comfort is staying warm. And the other thing is, I also have learned the lesson that no matter how cold it gets around here, I always can think to myself, I can take comfort in the fact that I know it could be worse than it has been for me. But here's another example. You know, anybody goes into a supermarket, Safeway or Giant as an example, or goes into a drugstore, CVS, or a store like that, we have whole aisles where we have every kind of product, especially medications and things like that. Why? To alleviate suffering, to alleviate pain. We want to avoid suffering, we want to avoid pain, and we look for those things that bring us comfort. Sometimes it's a legitimate form of medication and things like that that relieve pain, but how often do we see in our own experience or in the pain and the suffering we witness in the lives of others, that sometimes we look for the alleviation of suffering in ways that make things even worse? How many people find that they have a spiritual pain or an emotional pain? And where do they seek comfort? They might seek comfort in things like drugs or alcohol. Well, why do they reach out for those substances? Because they're suffering and they want comfort. But we know that sometimes the things that can bring us, at least in the short term, some sense of relief really only make life worse. And then the pain, the suffering increases and becomes not only physical, but oftentimes spiritual. So much of our life is, to be found, I hate to say it, and this is where it becomes a dark and a heavy and a difficult topic. Suffering is real, we try to avoid it. I think that, one of the things that we come together tonight to reflect on is the fact that in our human condition, suffering is something we try to avoid, but we know it's inevitable, and the blessing, I think, of being a Christian and a person of faith is that we first of all can know that in Jesus we're going to find comfort, the peace, the relief, the meaning that the world can't give, and also too that we know He has walked a way before us that shows us that what I'm saying and what you believe is actually true. Suffering can be part of our experience of being Christians. We take that as something that's from the words of Jesus, from the gospel itself. And so, knowing that, we can confront suffering as something we need not fear. Jesus in the Gospels, He speaks so often how if you would be His follower, if we all would be His followers, we need to take up our cross and follow Him. And when the people of His own time heard that message, take up your cross and follow me, we know that many people walked away. Many people found that message too hard to accept. We don't condemn them. That's a natural human reaction to the invitation to embrace a cross or to embrace suffering. And yet we also know that there were people who had enough faith in Him, who really experienced His love, believed His proclamation that the kingdom of heaven was at hand, and were willing, if He said so, to take up that cross, to follow Him. And because of His victory in His dying and rising, we who take up our crosses today, like those who have gone before us and have taken up the cross, we know that whatever suffering we endure, even that passage we all have to confront from this life into eternal life, the experience of dying, is one that ultimately leads to victory. in suffering, even in death, we're going to look for and we're going to find meaning. And that's what I think we might want to pray about and reflect on as we gather tonight. So tonight we really can, in a way that is going to make sense if it already has not, but I think it has and will continue to make sense for us. We can look at suffering as Christians and see that actually there are graces that can come from it. So we talked a little bit about suffering. What do I mean when we speak about grace? I think that there are many ways that people can reflect on what does that one simple word means. When we were seminarians, when we were learning, the theology of our church in preparation to be ordained to the priesthood, we had a whole semester's class on grace. We don't have that much time for us to go into all the details of grace tonight, but I like to think of grace as, a word that to me carries two simple meanings. One, if you look at the Latin word for grace, gratia, another way that word is translated besides grace is gift. So when we use the word grace tonight and whenever we're speaking about our faith and speak of grace, one way we can think of grace is a gift. Anything that is a grace is God's gift to us. It's not something we earn. It's not something that we merit. But grace is a gift to us. And the other way I think we can look at grace is a very simple definition of grace is to speak of it as our sharing in the life of God. So we begin to live a life of grace at the time of our baptism, when we receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, who is God, who comes to dwell within us. And if we can say that God's Spirit is dwelling within us, we can, in a very real and a true way, we can say we're sharing the life of God. When it comes to the celebration of the Eucharist, this is a grace in the twofold sense of the word. It's a gift. The gift of the body and blood of Christ given to us in our Holy Communion is a grace because it's a gift that God gives us. But it's also grace in the sense of sharing in the life of God because not what, but who are we receiving? We are receiving Jesus. We're receiving his body and blood in the Eucharist. And so by consuming his body and blood, once again, that life of God is renewed within each and every one of us. So tonight, I think we can look at suffering as being an experience we embrace, but one also that we can say brings with the grace of God if we look at it in those twofold ways. It is a sharing in the life of God, our experience of suffering, because Jesus is God, and Jesus took up his cross, and Jesus suffered and died for us, so we're sharing in God's life. And I think as we go on in our reflection, we'll see that even though we don't seek out and look for the experience of suffering, when we experience it, we embrace it, we accept it, we can find that there are gifts that God will give to those who accept this experience in a spirit of faith, with trust, with hope, with confidence that God will see us through the darkness until once again we experience the light of hope, the light of joy, the light of really the children of God that God would have us enjoy. So there are many types of suffering. We can all say that from our own experience, right? First and foremost, we probably think of the physical experience of suffering as the one that comes to mind first, and maybe the one that probably, again, we're trying our best to avoid with all of the creature comforts that we surround us with. I noticed Father Vaccaro is sitting on a very nice soft sofa back there. He's not sitting on a very hard and straight back chair. So I'm going to use him today as Exhibit A for a man who lives the life of physical comfort and and I don't want to put him on the spot here, but he's also like me wearing a collar that may be a little tight around his neck, and he's not opening up the collar and completely lounging in our midst tonight. So he embraces that little bit of suffering like we do to be a witness to the fact that we both have chosen to respond to God's call, to live a life as a priest in our church. So he's not totally a man of comfort and ease there, but he's also picking up his cross on a daily basis to follow the Lord. Physical suffering is a real experience of suffering. We also know that sometimes a very painful form of suffering can be an emotional suffering, or a psychological suffering, or a spiritual suffering, or an experience of suffering that includes one or two or all three of those dimensions of our human life. Certainly, the experience of loss, the experience of grief, the experience of sorrow is a kind of emotional suffering. I was very grateful to join with all of you, and I don't know who made the petition, but we offered a petition for prayers of the faithful today at Mass for people who are struggling with anxiety or with depression. These are psychological forms of suffering, and people who experience these types of suffering are in very real pain. And spiritually, when we think about really what we might speak of as the wounds that are caused by sin, when we experience sorrow in our heart, when we know that we may have offended God by our sin, or when we wound or sometimes even break the bonds of love and communion that we should have with one another as brothers and sisters in Christ, in the church, in our families, among friends, we really experience a spiritual kind of suffering. It's a pain. Each of those is a form of suffering. Some are more obvious and some are more apparent. The person who's walking around in crutches or with a neck brace, we want to reach out and to embrace with compassion and help alleviate their pain. But some are less apparent or less obvious, and that's why it's good for us to pray as well for people who are struggling with any kind of psychological or emotional or spiritual pain. When I offered my petitions in the Prayer of the Faithful, you're always kind of hesitant to be repetitive and say the same thing every day, but I do like to pray on a daily basis, especially at the Masses that we offer on weekdays in our parish and here, for people who are suffering in any way, especially those who are sick, physical suffering, those who are poor, which can be both physical and psychological. If you think of people who are poor, they might be hungry or homeless, that's a physical suffering, but they also feel marginalized. They feel like they are alienated from others in their poverty. I really like to pray not only for those who are sick, those who are poor, but those who are lonely. There's a pain in loneliness that's both psychological and spiritual. I like to pray for people who mourn, people who are grieving. Again, psychologists could talk about that as a psychological or an emotional suffering, but we know too there's a spiritual suffering that we could talk about when we speak of the experience of mourning. So this is where it gets dark. This is where it gets heavy. But let's shift gears to the grace side of things again for a minute. If grace, one of the ways we might describe grace, is sharing the life of God, I think it's important for us always to remember that whether ours or others' suffering is physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional, the gift of our faith reminds us that Jesus has shared in each and every one of those types of suffering. When he says, take up your cross and follow me, he's asking us to do something that he has already done himself. Or another way of saying is he's not asking us to do anything that he hasn't already done and done for us, for our sake, for our salvation. So clearly, during this time of the season of Lent, as in a special way we practice some of the devotions that we associate with Lent, like the Stations of the Cross, for example, or when we pray the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary, or as we get closer and closer to Holy Week, and on Palm Sunday, and on Good Friday, we read the gospel stories of the passion of Jesus, the suffering and death. Jesus, we know, suffered in physical ways. I also think that Jesus suffered emotionally, spiritually, psychologically as well. Emotionally, think of how many times Jesus in his life, not just at the end of his life when he was abandoned by his friends, but think about how many times Jesus was misunderstood by people. Just the gospel we heard tonight. Here's Jesus doing a good deed, a miraculous thing, freeing a person from an evil spirit. And then people turn around and say, you do that because you work for the prince of demons. I mean, Jesus was human like us in all things but sin. He must have been disappointed. He must have been discouraged at times. Psychological suffering, when you think of the mystery of the Rosary that describes the agony in the garden, that's real suffering. To say that Jesus experienced fear or worry or even anxiety is not to take anything away from his being God. Because Jesus was God, he was fully a divine person, but he also embraced and took upon himself all of our human nature, except sin. So if we ever experience the type of psychological suffering, anxiety, depression, discouragement, fear, worry, all of that, we can hopefully experience remembering that we're never alone in that, because others share it in our world. Other human beings share that experience, but so too does Jesus. He has. And so we share the life of Christ. I would say we share God's life. We live a life of grace, not only by virtue of the sacraments, but by living a fully human life, embracing even the experience of suffering as Jesus did himself. And when we think of spiritual suffering, Jesus suffered in spiritual ways too. I mean, the greatest example probably of all was the experience of the spiritual suffering of betrayal by a friend. That's a real breaking of a bond of communion, a communion which is a bond of love. Friendship is ultimately a form of love, and Jesus, when he was betrayed, experienced the breaking of that bond. And so we know he suffered in a spiritual way. So I would have to say we need to remember that we can be tempted ourselves to become discouraged when we are lonely, when we are afraid, when we know sorrow in our lives. We can be discouraged, tempted to discouragement when we feel rejection, disappointment, anxiety, worry, or fear ourselves. We can be tempted to be discouraged when we experience physical suffering and pain. But in all of this, I think we need to take hope and take courage and remember that suffering is never anything that's a moral evil. It's nothing that we've done wrong if we feel suffering or pain, especially the emotional, the spiritual, the psychological types of suffering. But we remember that where Jesus has gone before us, that's where we're following. And to live a life of grace, to share the life of God, sometimes includes not only the great feeling of love and joy and peace, which are the fruit of the Holy Spirit, but sharing the life of God too. Sometimes is like Jesus, taking up our cross and following him in that way. Now, it happens, I guess, like all things in God's plan, that, as I mentioned before, I started to realize when I started to prepare for this day, wow, suffering, that's not everybody's favorite topic. But in God's plan, I have to say, I feel like if there's a grace that's coming out of suffering for me in my own life, personally right now, at this particular moment, it's the opportunity to be among you. And to just share briefly, if I would, the experience of suffering that I've known in my own life in recent days. I've seen suffering in my own life as I watch my father who has suffered, as I watch my mom accompany him through a time of serious illness. And as I try to make sense of it all for myself, along with brothers and sisters, as we try to understand why are things happening the way they are in our family, and how do we respond or react as people of faith. To briefly share the story, about a week or so ago on a Sunday, like I typically do, our parish mass schedule at Good Shepherd has masses in the morning and then one last mass in the afternoon at 6:30. So I was introduced as the pastor of Good Shepherd. One of the things I would tell you is not only am I the pastor of Good Shepherd, but I grew up in Good Shepherd Parish. So at this particular time, I am also my parents' pastor, because they live there too, still to this day. I was born in New York, and I grew up in New York until I was in 7th grade. And when I was in 7th grade, my family moved to Virginia, to Mount Vernon. Good Shepherd was our parish. After that, from the time I was in 7th grade till the time I went to the seminary, I was a parishioner of Good Shepherd. And my parents, to this day, still live in the house that they bought and moved into in 1978. So I had the opportunity to live 10 minutes from home from my parents. So on Sunday afternoon, after I seek physical comfort in taking a nap in the afternoon, I get up and have dinner, usually with my parents, and I can get back to church for the 6:30 Mass, which I did a week ago Sunday, celebrated the Mass, and shortly after the Mass, I got a message from my mom saying, we're going to Mount Vernon